I've got a few different enterprises at home. Primarily, we run merino sheep. It's 4,000 merino sheep we run there, and have my great-grandparents settled there in the 1860s, so I'm fourth generation on property, and we've run merino sheep for that time. A few other things as well. We grow crops, as in not a lot of crops. It's primarily a grazing enterprise, but about 500 or 600 acres or so of crops. Some of those, mostly oats, but also multi-species crops, which I'll talk a bit about later. We've got a company starting to sell dogs all over the world. That's 30 or 40 years old, and also merino stud and some merino rams. What I am going to talk about also, I think is really quite interesting. Over time, I've restored the grassland at home. The property used to be, in my father's era, a high input property, as in a lot of fertiliser and pesticides, and we were left with bare ground, annual weeds, and just clover and ryegrass type pastures. So I restored the native grassland there, and it is one of the best enterprises on the property. And we sell about 2 tonne of native seed a year, and I'll talk more about that later, about how we can add other enterprises to our existing properties that complement what we're doing. So, how can we restore our farms? Because almost all of our farms, including the one at home, it certainly needed restoring, and it's still in progress. So, virtually all of our farms need restoring. Manage dry seasons, which is a fairly obvious one at the moment here, and be profitable. We always obviously need to be profitable. To be more profitable, we really need to look at, well, how come we're not more profitable, but also what's gone wrong. What's changed to make us less profitable than often than our fathers and grandfathers were on the same land, and what's changed in that process? It's almost not a lack of management, but lack of conditions on the property. Most of our properties over time have declined, and each generation has created a lot of that. So, many paddocks and whole properties, this is basically what I run into this. I do a lot of on-farm visits and helping people with a lot of this stuff. And many paddocks but whole properties often have become unproductive and covered in annual weeds, and more so than that, hard compacted soils. The hard compacted soils is usually the reason why we have a lot of weeds. Those same properties have very few perennial species on them, very few perennial grassland species. In other words, they've lost their grasslands. And so that's it's associated with being unproductive and weeds and hard compacted soils. The property at home, I'm no different at all, but in the early 1990s, we started measuring what was on the property, and we did that with a 100-metre transect, they're called, and measuring and recording plants on every metre along that line. And I was quite shocked, it really, when you actually measure something, how bad it was. And the property was 60% annual weeds, like things like what you call Salvation Jane, Patterson's curse, Cape weed, all those types of weeds. So, and very few perennial grass species on it. There was odd ones, you could find one there and one there. There was that few on there, I just about had them named, as in, this one's Fred, and there wasn't many. So it wasn't a grassland when I started to manage it. It was in my grandfather's day, but we lost it along the way. And that it's important to know, well, at least in what's happened at home, but that's the same thing that's happened almost everywhere. Nothing unique about how we stuffed our grasslands at home. So, what were the grasslands like through these areas? And we know that the areas through these types of areas were, and what they were like pre-European times, not just 50 years ago or 100 years ago. What were they like before they were stuffed by the early settlers? Really, now the grasslands, and it's quite well documented, except through these areas, it's not, in South Australia generally, it's difficult to find good records of what the grasslands were like. Some of the other areas, Victoria, New South Wales and into Queensland, the early explorers documented the grasslands quite well. And there was a reason why, because they were sent out there not just only to find their way around, but they were actually looking for grazing land. So they did document the grasslands in those areas, so we knew what they were like. It's more difficult to find good information. Someone might have good information, it'd be great to have it. But we do know that the grasslands in South Australia generally were as good as anywhere else. So now, the reason why our grasslands in Australia, they were good, and not only that, they were reported by the early explorers and the early settlers, who basically were European, about how good they were, and they were comparing them to Europe and England and those areas. So they were pretty handy grasslands. And they were glowing in terms of the fattening ability on them, not only just sheep, but they used to often talk about horses, how well horses did on these grasslands, because they were using horses for work. So, but the arrival of Europeans started a decline in grasslands quite quickly, and that's because they put sheep in such huge numbers on them very early. And a lot of the sheep, especially into Victoria, and I'm pretty sure into here, came across from Tasmania, because they had that many sheep in Tasmania, they totally stuffed it, and they moved the sheep into Victoria and then onto the mainland and continued to stuff the mainland with too many sheep. So the sheep always get the blame, but it's not the sheep, it's the management of them. The animal's never the problem, it's how we manage them. So, what caused the destruction of our grasslands? There's a few things. Inappropriate grazing, and the early settlers, they were European. They had no idea. This country was so different to anything they'd ever experienced before. How could they possibly get it right? It was nearly impossible for them to know. How do you know? They may as well have been on the moon. It was that far away from what they knew. So they grazed it like they did in Europe, and generally ran far too many stock on it, but also had no real way of knowing. The other thing which really was the death knell for a lot of grasslands was ploughing and growing crops, and really early. That's a photo from the farm at home, my grandfather, that photo there. So they're the two main things. Rabbits come into it as well. Rabbits did a lot of damage as well. So the grasslands at home aren't quite as yellow as that, but that's just a photo. It's just sort of taken nearly out of my front door, really. That paddock, that there. The best way to understand good pasture, we're looking at pasture as well as grasslands here, is to understand how grasslands function. And because, well, we need to understand how grasslands function so that we can restore them. But if we're going to be planting anything, sowing any types of pasture, which in these areas I really don't recommend, but we need to understand how they functioned. So Our original grassland was very diverse and very complex. There's over 1,000 species Australia-wide of grassland species. And when we're talking about grasslands, we're not just talking about grasses, we're talking about shrubs and forbs and herbs as well. Just over out of interest, it might be a bit of useless information for most people, but there's over 700 grassland orchid species in Australia. A huge amount when you think about that.
And do sheep and cattle eat any of them?
Sheep and cattle ate, if there's none left here now, there you can bet they ate all of them. So, yep, that's, yep, they're all very palatable, and I'll explain something here later of what's happened to our grassland. So, in these areas, and it's only a bit of a guess, we have a lady here that probably knows exactly how many species were probably here. So, but there were probably around 200 species, may have been more. There's a figure tossed around 200 to 300 species in a given area. So, so they were very diverse, heaps of them. Now, if we think of 200 or 300 species in a grassland, think about when we sow a pasture, how many species do we put in it? 2, if we're really lucky 3. We're about 197 short. I'm not suggesting we can get to that many in sowing a pasture, but when we sow pastures, we're often, it's not diverse enough, and that is not good for anything much. So, grassland species have evolved to tolerate the moderately low rainfalls in these areas and temperatures. And much of eastern Australia was covered in the iron grasslands. East and South Australia. Our grasslands also had a lot of different species in them. I'm going to get on to this in a minute. And the C3 and C4 stuff comes up again, which I'll explain in some detail, because it's important to understand how that works. So why are we talking about grasslands? They're the best benchmark to have to model our farms on to function as an ecosystem. Now, no one talks about ecology and ecosystems when in agriculture, but it's the most vital thing we can to fix our properties. The reason we get, say, crop diseases, declining nutrient decline, insect attack, all the problems that are associated with agriculture are actually not agricultural ones, they're ecological ones. The whole system, the whole thing's out of whack. There's no natural controls anymore. There's no natural beneficial things anymore. So grasslands are about species diversity, but not just plants, animals, insects, soil microbes. So we need to think about our soils also. We should have a farm ecosystem and a soil ecosystem functioning. So when our farms function like grasslands, we will fix most of our problems. To start with, we'll become profitable. And we're talking about getting them closer to how they were originally. We'll start to fix a lot of our soil health problems to start with. Nutrient cycling, water use efficiencies, weeds, all the diseases, including metabolic diseases of our sheep and cattle. So now the types of plants in a grassland, just go through this quickly. Perennial C3 grasses and annual C3 grasses. Now, they're winter growing ones. They grow in the cooler months of the year, the C3 ones. And they can be perennial. Perennial meaning long-lived, annual just for 1 year. Now, if our properties are just dominated by annuals, of either summer or winter ones, we'll almost always be only about 3 or 4 weeks off a drought, because annuals just will chuck the towel in. All that they're on about is producing seed for the next generation. They'll produce some quite good feed while they're growing, but that's about it. It's not long enough. So perennials are vitally important. Forbs are flowering plants, forbs and herbs. Flowering plants a very important part of certainly our original grasslands, but also can be a very valuable part. And in this, I'm mainly talking about in an agricultural sense. But if we put all this together, it's also very important from an ecological and a conservation sense as well. But I'm mainly talking here about feeding our sheep and cattle and looking after them better. But if we do that right, we'll look after our land as well. So also, especially in these environments, scattered trees and shrubs are also a vital part of it as well. C3 and C4 plants. Now, the C3 and C4 thing, we don't need to get too far into this. You could talk all day just about this and you'd go I'd bore you to death. Refer to different pathways that plants use to capture carbon dioxide. Now, plants need carbon, we know this, probably learned at school, hopefully. Plants need carbon dioxide, sunlight and water. Water might be the limiting factor at the moment. So that, it's the most amazing process on the planet, really is. So this gives some plants, that process there, C3, C4, gives some plants the ability to tolerate really hot, dry conditions. So, which is very important in these environments. So what's a C4 plant? Again, it can be perennial or annual. Most of our grassland, the high percentage of our grassland plants were perennials. Are, and certainly were, Australia's dominant grassland species. Of those 1,085 plants I had up there, the majority of them, Australia-wide, were C4s, were summer growers. Now that's probably a surprise to you in these environments we're in now, in here. Now, those types are mostly summer growers, have very high water use efficiency. In other words, they tolerate dry seasons really well. They also tolerate hot temperatures really well. That's where they thrive. So they generally produce a lot of biomass, a lot of feed, stock feed, but it's not quite as high a quality as the winter growing ones. Less than 1% of the Earth's plants are this C4. Now that in itself is interesting when we think about it. Before I go on to the next slide, we know that our grasslands in Australia are at least, well, no, as far as we know, about 30 million years old, somewhere around that. And Australia is dominated by these, was originally dominated by these warm season C4 plants that are really tolerant of hot, dry conditions. So if these grasses are 30 million years, we're talking about million years old, it's been bloody hot and dry here for a long time, so we better get used to it. It's not going to change overnight. Now, some of the ones here, the types of grasses, and I'll go down the bottom. Not that you don't grow these crops here, but millet and sorghum, those, corn, even sugarcane, are grasses that grow like C4 grasses. They're summer grasses. Some introduced ones, they're from the African grassland, digit grass, green panic Rhodes grass, also fit into there. The native ones, and there's a lot more than we've got here, like the windmill grasses, like the chlorosis, kangaroo grass, you probably know some of these, box grass, the paspaldiums, red grass, wiregrass, they're all fit into this category. A C3 grass, again, can be perennial or annual, but they grow in the cooler months of the year. And they require more water than the warm season C4s, but are very tolerant of cold. Cold generally won't affect them very much at all. So, but they're not tolerant of days over 30 degrees. In fact, they'll start dropping out at less than that. So, but they do produce good quality feed, livestock feed, and most of the plants on the planet fit into that category. This one's interesting. they're not tolerant of heat over 30 degrees. So if we're getting to about October, it might be a bit earlier here, about October, and you are dreading the first hot day in October, because we nearly always get one, a 35 or 40 degree one, and you're dreading because you know, even before you get that hot day, that you're not going to have any feed left, because your main spring feed will be gone. Now, that's got nothing to do with rainfall. What it's got to do with is with temperature and the fact that you don't have any species here that will grow in those hot months. They're all cool season plants. So if you haven't got anything that'll grow through into those summer months, you're going to have a summer drought every year, and not because of lack of rainfall. So some of these that the cool season grasses, that you definitely have wallaby grasses around these areas. Probably not a lot of weeping grass here. It gets probably a bit dry and hot for them, but certainly plains grass and spear grasses, you definitely have those. They fit into that winter growing. Now the common wrong button. The common pasture species that are grown, I'm not recommending these at all here. Like Phalaris, ryegrass, cocksfoot, fescue, all of those that are often in pasture mixes are C3s, so cool seasons. And the crops we grow, wheat, oats, barley, are C3s as well, which is why we grow them in the winter. So forbs and herbs, they were a very valuable component of the grasslands. There was a fairly, I've seen some really pristine grasslands, and there was probably just an estimate of probably 30% of these, but I mean, you're not going to see many like that. But there was a lot of these flowering plants in our grasslands. Glycines, orchids, lilies, irises, daisies, all those. They fill the gaps in between the grass tussocks. And the introduced ones, the ones we often sow are actually forbs and herbs, which is like clover, lucerne, chicory, plantain. And if we're going to try to restore sort of an artificial grassland, they can fit the role of these forbs and herbs. And we know they're very high quality feed, as these ones here were also. Now this graph really does illustrate how it functions. Along the bottom, obviously, months of the year. Up the sides, we talk about basically sort of biomass, really, how much bulk these grasses will produce. As the summer, pink one are the warm season C4s. And as the season progresses and gets colder and colder, around about April, May, they go into winter dormancy. These are the summer grasses. They're governed by temperature, most of these. Then go to sleep for the winter. They're not dead. These are perennials I'm talking about. They go to sleep for the winter and start to awake again in as the temperature starts to increase, sort of in that sort of September, October. But probably October, usually around there. Now the other side of this thing, C3s, as these ones are shutting down in the autumn, those ones are starting to fire up. If it rains, of course. If we've got because rain is the limiting factor in all this. So, if we have a really good functioning grassland, there won't, rainfall permitting again, there won't be a time when there's not something growing. Now, and the reverse happens on this end. They shut down as the weather gets hot, and those warm season C4s grow. Now, there's a graph which covers a lot of southern Australia. Victoria, this fits for here as well. That's just a C3, either pasture or a grassland that's had the warm season ones removed mostly by management. And you can see there, there's nothing. You have nothing in the summer. Can have good feed in the winter, winter, spring, but nothing here. So if we can correct that and fix that, that would be ideal. I'm talking about on our properties, if we can get it more back to that type of thing. So, question obviously, is there enough rainfall now to grow C4 grasses? Because in Victoria and in this state here, everyone's been told there's not enough summer rain to grow these grasses. Now that's bullshit. There was C4 grasses here originally, a lot of them. So it's not lack of rainfall. It's obviously management. And what actually I believe has happened is, and not really the fault of anyone, just misunderstanding. Early days with sheep and cattle, but mainly sheep, because most of South Australia, not as you get further north, but most of South Australia and Victoria have more winter rain than summer. So the original grasslands, when they were grazed, because the rainfall was less, those sheep really hammered those summer grasses, and so they got taken out. A lot of them, some of the winter ones survived, but a lot of them were taken out eventually. But the summer ones went first. So just here, this is just a Bureau of Meteorology. Someone will say that's not right, but it's about as good as we can find. Your rainfall here, from what I can gather, is about 300 mil. That'd be close, sort of around here. I'm not talking about this year.
In the last 10 years, I don't think you would have had 3 years.
Yeah. We're talking about an average thing. Yeah. So we've had a run of pretty ordinary years. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. But what we're looking at much here is what happens in the summer and winter. Now, interestingly, here from October to March, which is basically the 6 months of summer, 40% of the rain falls then, and 60% in the winter. So it's not as winter dominant here. Well, that surprised me when I looked at it. I thought it might have had more winter rain than that, and less summer. But another interesting thing is that rain there is all you've got, 180 mils to grow crop on. I was down the York Peninsula doing some work on a property down there. They are very much winter dominated rainfall, hardly any in the summer really, right down in there. And they get about the same rainfall, 300 mil, but they can get that right in that crop growing period. So what I'm talking about here is that starts to get a bit risky if you think about here, in that you're struggling to have enough reliable rain to reliably grow crops. You can do it. I'm not saying that you can't. And there's a few other things I'm going to talk about in regard to that. But yes, there is enough rain to grow summer grasses. There's that much rain, so you definitely would be able to get summer grasses growing. And we're going to talk mostly, Alejandro and I, about management, how we change it with management, not necessarily sowing things. We have on those trial plots there, with trial plots, that's what they're all about. Can they be grown from seed? But we're mostly looking at management to get changes. So we can restore our grasslands, and how? How do we fix our farms? And this is just a general thing. Our farms, soil nutrient decline, insect attack, all those problems, and be profitable, which is the key. And how can that be done without expending heaps of money? Because part of the problem now, and I don't need to tell everyone here this, our costs are getting that high in agriculture, it's bloody difficult for everyone. that's a big part of the problem. So how do we get around that? So a low fertiliser and pesticide can be an aid to agriculture. They've actually created many problems, especially the pesticide things. The fertiliser side is, if it's done at a moderate rate, really doesn't do a lot, heaps of damage, but certainly the pesticides, insecticides and fungicides do a lot of damage to grassland ecosystems and properties. And why I'm saying this, we need to be quite really careful about, or have an understanding of what's going on when we put a lot of this stuff on. I'm not talking about organic stuff here at all. There's nothing wrong with organic, but my property is not organic. I use some herbicides and fertilisers under crops as well. But so that's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about being a bit more careful with some of these products. But increasing the fertiliser and pesticides will not fix our farms, no matter what the salesman tells us. The problem with our properties is that our farm and soil ecosystems are broken. That's what's wrong. It's not lack of fertiliser. So that's like saying lack of Panadol is what causes headaches. So, which is certainly not the case. Lack of fertiliser is not the problem with our farms. So, how do we fix it? To start with, most of the time our farm soil has become dysfunctional. It doesn't work like it used to. It doesn't cycle nutrients like it used to. It doesn't hold as much water as it used to. And the reason why is that we don't have enough plant diversity. We need more plants and plant diversity to fix that problem. So, and the reason, like it's become, when it becomes dysfunctional, like our soils is basically collapsing really, that's why we need to add ever increasing amounts of fertiliser and pesticides. That's certainly the case with cropping. And anyone growing crops knows that, oh gee, if you look back 10 or 20 years ago, I wasn't putting that much fertiliser on then, but now I seem to have to put more and more on. So and that's related to a collapsed soil ecosystem. There's not enough microbes there driving it. There's not enough plants on top that feed the microbes. So, we need to allow the farm and soil to function as an ecosystem. When it does, we'll get better nutrient cycling, which means less fertiliser, if we're using fertiliser. So, no insect attack, no insecticide, no fungicide, no crop diseases. While I'm on that, I've got a bit more at the end of this talk on this, but I haven't used, hang on, on the property, it used to have fertiliser put on pastures, and I haven't had any on pastures for 40 years. The cropping fertiliser's been reduced by 70%. We haven't used fungicides or pesticides for 25 years, I think it is. You don't necessarily need them because our Mother Nature will fix these problems for us anyway. In other words, the ecosystem stuff, just natural systems is all we're really talking about. So, sorry?
What about
Herbicide. Now, you will never grow, if you're growing a crop, you will never grow a reasonable crop unless you do something about the weeds. If you've got weeds there and try to grow anything in them, it basically won't work. So we need to do something about them. But one of the worst herbicides that we use, and nothing to do with human health or anything else, is Roundup. And that's because Roundup works too bloody well. It kills everything. Now, we don't necessarily need to kill everything. We can use more selectives. Like there's a bit of a panic on about, what happens if Roundup gets banned. There's plenty of other things we can use. But
not as cheap.
That's the way it goes. If it is not available, you can bet there'll be other ones that will be. And yeah, Roundup was as dear as buggery when it first started. It was that expensive, hardly anyone could afford it. So it wasn't always cheap. But it is a real problem when we're trying to fix our farms, when something works like it's just been designed to kill everything. And okay, it's an amazing herbicide, but what if we're trying to get more plants and get it functioning better, it can be a serious problem. I haven't used Roundup 25 or 30 years, but I use other herbicides. Not saying they're any better to use health-wise or anything like that, but you know, they're kinder to the plants that I'm wanting to keep there, is what I'm saying. So how do we change, and what do we change to? Now, if we modify, and we often don't have to make any radical, huge changes here. If we modify the way we graze animals and grow crops, are we talking mainly, both of us today, about grazing in these areas here. So we can increase plant diversity, restore soil structure, all these things down here. Probably don't need to read them out, but we can fix our properties fairly easily and start to make more profit. I've got it at the end of this talk, but I'll say it now. Compared to the when I changed, when I was using higher, wasn't that high, I guess, higher input farm management methods, and especially cropping methods, I save $100,000 every year that I don't spend because I don't need those things. And production and profit are a lot higher. Certainly profit, you know, if you're $100,000 ahead before you start, it's fairly handy. And that's every year. I'm going to tell a story. This is sort of putting this together on before we start talking a lot about growing crops and stuff. My father was very innovative, and in the 1930s he started growing crops and using fertiliser, and he was a long way ahead of the game. He had tractors while a lot of them were still using horses, and growing some pretty handy crops. Like that crop there, 1932 I think that was, that's a fairly handy wheat crop by any standards. Okay, those old varieties did grow tall. So he was doing really well with his wheat. Now, and he started growing wheat mainly because of the Depression years. Through the 1930s, things got really tight for everyone, but on the land as well. And sheep prices dropped, meat prices dropped, nothing new. Wool prices dropped in the 1930s. So he reckoned that, well, he'd start growing more and more wheat. And he did. And he grew wheat, a lot of wheat, and he became fully mechanised at the time, just out of interest, a bit of useless information, but it was probably the best tractor you could find. It was a Twin City Minneapolis Moline tractor, an imported tractor, and that was the best equipment at the time. It was quite interesting. They're in the local museum now, that machinery. So he really got into it, and for his time, and cropped for 20 years straight. Grew wheat, mostly wheat on wheat, but because that's what they do. We know now there's no way you should do that. But eventually, after 20 years, the whole thing started to collapse on him, and he got to a point where the crops got less and less and less. Nothing like that good crop there, and then he got erosion through the property, and he said, "Well, gee, you can't continue doing this." He realised he had to stop growing wheat. It was becoming unprofitable anyway, but the property was just collapsing. Now, so he thought, oh, well, I'll start running sheep again. He still kept some on, but he wanted to build his numbers back up. But he then, when he looked at where he was going to run his sheep, he had no feed left. That 20 years of cropping destroyed the grassland and anything there. and he had nowhere to run his sheep. Now, what I'm getting to here, a little bit different circumstances, but what's happened in a lot of, all over Australia, well, not only Australia, but other countries as well. As our grasslands and our grasslands have declined, it's become less and less profitable to run animals on them because there's less feed. And then what people have done, and it's happened everywhere, not here or anywhere in particular, but and it's a similar story to this. As the grasslands declined, it became less and less profitable. People were doing it harder because they couldn't run as many animals. Wool production, all that sort of thing started to drop. And so, like my father, many people then started to grow crops. Now the problem is, this here that happened to him is a really good chance it'll happen with even the way crops are growing now, even though they've done better than he was doing. But we can't continue growing crops the way we are. Costs getting too high anyway, but our soils are collapsing as they did with him, especially when we're putting that much pesticides on it and increasing rates of fertiliser. So be really careful about heading too far down that way, because history tells us that it's a dangerous road. Now, had a major bushfire at home in 1979, which forced me to change everything. It lost 3,000 sheep and all the buildings and fences, and it was like an atomic bomb went off. So I started growing crops the way my father did, with ploughing and all of that. But what happened was I changed the way I grew crops because I could see the grassland declining more and more, and pastures declining and increasing costs. So I stopped in I changed the way I grew crops in 93. And developed a different way of growing crops called pasture cropping. And around the same time I changed the grazing management as well. So just a little bit, not going to talk much about pasture cropping, just really want to stay on the grazing side of things. Now, pasture cropping is actually perennial cover cropping. There's a bit of information coming out about growing covers. Cover cropping, I might add, not necessarily perennial cover cropping, but cover cropping generally is probably the only way that we can turn the cropping side of things around all around the world. But that's another story. If people want information on that, that's good. But I'll get belled off here in a minute if I keep going. But this way works really well for me. Remember I said about talking about warm season grasses there earlier. They go dormant in the winter. What I'm doing with this is zero tilling, not ploughing, but direct seeding into those dormant grasslands in the winter and growing cereal crops into them. What it does is help restore the grassland. It doesn't destroy the grassland at all. In fact, it enhances it, increases diversity, and we can grow some fairly handy crops as well. It's just another way. I know.
So what happens, like if you have have you had problems with then those grasses getting too high for harvesting?
You can, especially if you end up with a bit of a wet harvest. Yeah. What actually happens? These green in there are actually the warm season grasses. Now, what happens is that these grasses not only don't they like cold weather, they like it hot, but they don't like shade. So the crop shades those grasses and stops them getting up into the crop. So yeah, a lot of people ask that, and it's a fair enough question actually, because you'd think that's what happened. Like if you had well, you know, if you've got lucerne or anything like any winter growing thing in there, it will get up into the crop. But these warm season ones don't like the shade.
What row spacing?
They're foot spacings. Yeah. And it is a good way. You're better off to go wider in dry rainfall environments, probably all over Australia really, than narrower, like the old 7-inch is a bit too close, the spacings. So,
why do you say that? Because then you leave more grass behind?
No, not necessarily even that, just in normal cropping.
I always thought they talk 10
10 to 12 inch, yeah, fine, yeah. Yeah, you don't need to go to 20 or something like that. No. And it's better water use. You've got a bit more room between the rows, in a drier environment. Yeah.
As soon as you get to about 12 here, our erosion is like when the sheep walk down those rows.
They probably would, yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things with this, I'm not saying this suits everyone at all, but it's just something I'm throwing out there. There was a few of the blokes at Craddock. We were at Craddock, I don't know where we've been, up the edge of the rangeland, really interested in this, mostly to fill in feed gaps, and opportunistic cropping for forage. And because you can retain your grasses, you don't kill them at all. Anyway, but what it can do, we can produce grain or grazing off them. It will and does restore grassland species. Like the grasses we found will come up in the drill row, germinate from seed that's in the soil, sat there for probably 40 or 50 years. Will come up in the drill row, and that's how I've restored the grassland at home. A combination of that form of cropping and grazing management, holistic grazing management, combination of the two. I've always overlaid grazing management on this method. But we can improve soil health and increase soil carbon. The reason why that happens is that we're growing more plants. We're increasing the perennials, but we're also putting that really fast growing annual in there, which produces a lot of sugars and feeds a lot of microbes and restores. That's another story. So the other side of this are multi-species crops, and these are exceptionally good forage. But we'll restore our soils really quickly, do a good job on restoring soil ecosystems, and that's just a mixed crop with all, they're the species in that. We actually harvested, that particular crop was harvested for grain. We took that to harvest the whole lot. And so we end up with all those species in the mix. Now, what do you do with that? I just resowed that as a mix. But you could actually clean that seed and take them out and sell them as separate seeds. It's just it's mostly about throwing ideas out there to people of other things that are possible. That's as much as anything. Those mixes, very, very good stock feed. Extremely good. Better than, say, oats on its own. Nothing wrong with oats, but that mix is extremely good. Faster fattening and finishing on them, and animal health. And that's because the diet's better. You've got 6 or 10 species in there. We're told, we shouldn't just eat ice cream or chocolates. We should eat a mix of things. Well, but we feed our old ewes just the same thing and wonder why they get a bellyache. So, a very high quality feed on them. So, just some ideas there. How do we fix our pasture? I'm just going to move through this a bit quickly. Now, establishing pasture should only be done when the grasslands have totally been removed. I mean, it's often if by cropping. If we crop for quite a while, there's not a lot of seed left. What we're trying to do with a lot of this is stimulate the germination of seed that's still remaining in the soil, and there usually is, almost always, especially on grazed country. Areas that have been cropped a lot are slower. The property at home had been cropped quite a lot, but not continuously, not crop on crop. But those paddocks that have been cropped more were a lot slower to get the grassland species back into. So what I'm saying here is that, especially in these areas, those lower rainfall areas, be really careful about totally losing all of your seed out of your soils, because you won't get them back. So if we do sow pastures, because that grassland is totally gone, they should be dominated by perennial species, not just annuals, and that should function like a grassland. Just the stuff I was talking about, grasslands, you should have mixes, but they can be introduced species. But they should be summer grasses, winter grasses, forbs and herbs, the same as a grassland functions, if they are resown.
And you're going to give us a list of these things? Will you give us a list of what ones we should be doing?
We can, yeah. we can. I haven't got them in here, but some we can. Some of those African grasses, like digit grass, is a really good grass. It won't become an environmental weed like buffle does. Don't grow. We're not allowed to grow buffle here anyway. It's not like buffle, but it is a warm season one, for example. Rhodes grass is all right as well, but I know digit is pretty good.
Rhodes grass is another one that, especially the blockies.
Yeah. So but digit's better. It's more of a clump grass. Rhodes has got runners on it, but it can fit into there if you're re-sowing a totally stuffed paddock. But you need more than that. That's just one. You can use things like with the Forbs and herbs. Chicory is a pretty drought tolerant plant and can be good. It's basically a Forb we can put in there as an artificial grassland. Lucerne maybe. I mean, this is probably a bit low for rainfall for Lucerne. So there's a few there, and some of the cool season ones that are off. But make them. Make sure that they're mostly perennials. Yeah. He says the Forbs and herb partners I just said there. Chicory's probably the main fit, but I mean, don't get stuck just on one or two plants. Otherwise, you run into the same problems. You need as many as you can think of. So here's this. You can sow those. But not instead of your natives. The first step we should be doing is restoring our grasslands. And if they're grazed, yes, we can. We can get them back closer to how they were. So, what's wrong with annual plants in these sort of mixes? Small number of annual plants can be good. They do produce high quality feed and fast growth, but too many will put you into a drought all the time. If that's all you've got, you're only a short distance off a drought. Shallow roots, ineffective water use, they're not going to increase soil carbon. Pasture species you should grow. What ones you want to which ones you should grow. Don't grow plants that want to die, and that's what we do. Make sure it suits your environment. Grow plants that want to live. Like the people selling seed will want to sell you everything, whether it lives or dies. So you do your own homework on this. Make sure it suits your environment, not your climate and soil type. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about harvesting, cleaning and sowing native seed species, grassland species, because there is interest generally, I've found in the days that we've been doing on how we can harvest our own seed and get it onto our properties, which is really the better way. Well, the first thing is graze it better, like Alejandro is going to talk about, and the second, we can harvest our own seed off our own properties because that's the best seed we can use. It's suited to this area. But there's lots of different type harvesters you can purchase. Some around the country, some land care groups have actually purchased harvesters, as a group, which is a good idea. So different types of harvesters. We, I think I might mention earlier, harvest about 2 tonne. It is about 2 tonne we'll harvest this year of native seed, and there's a really good market for it. We can't produce enough. So it gives an option. Certainly, it's the most profitable enterprise we've got in that there's no cost in it. In something like, well, other than time, you've still got to be harvesting, and then we put it through a seed cleaner. And there's a lot of well, hang on, can't say a lot. There's been growing interest all the time in native seed. Now, there's another thing too that's come up. I've only got one. Oh, hang on, sorry. I'll get on to it in a minute. I don't sow native seed at home at all. I just manage for it, and I've got the grassland back. But these type of equipment, a normal small seed box that's used to sow pasture, can sow many of the small native seeds. That seed there is Paspaldium. different to the one that grows here, that commonly called Warrego. It'll go through those small seed boxes easy. So there's a few of them without awns on them that can be sown through a normal box, and quite good germination rates. Not as good as if you put a clover in. They've got more hard seed than that. But what's interesting, I'm involved in this project. Well, it's not a project. Sydney University have got a research centre at Narrabri, which is northern New South Wales. My main role in it is supplying seed to this project, but the Gamilaroi Aboriginal people, especially the ladies, have been working with Sydney University on rediscovering of the uses of grassland species as for human consumption. And so the Aboriginal ladies, they have baking days, and they produce these magnificent breads and things from a native seed. Now, and I'll tell a little, I shouldn't probably tell stories, but I will tell a little story. I was interested in this for a long time, and I did what I thought the Aboriginal people did. I ground some seed up and tried to cook it and make something out of it. And the bloody thing was just about inedible. So I thought, oh, gee, these people must have ate some rough stuff. But then I realised, and I thought, hang on, it probably doesn't matter if we don't like the taste of it, because if a whole nation, as in Australia, can be taught to eat something as unpalatable as Vegemite, we can probably learn to eat anything. So, but actually, these ones that these Aboriginal ladies are cooking, it tastes pretty good. But there are quite a few different species.
Sowing the native seeds,
So,
just with sowing the native seeds, can you sow the C3 and C4 at the same time, or do you need to sow them before their season?
just repeat that a bit.
So if you're growing C3 and C4 perennial seeds,
yep.
can you
Okay.
just sow them all at once?
Now, I always thought, and any people that start advising on this say that a C4 plant should be sown in about October, because that's when they start to actually grow. And I got thinking about this because we're harvesting seed all the time, and the seed is ripe on those C4 grasses anywhere from, say, January, February, even up to April. So they're actually sowing themselves in the autumn. They're dropping seed then. So I reckon you can just sow them all at the same time, because those C4 grasses are not going to germinate then anyway. They won't germinate till the summer, till the ground temperature's warm enough, about 20 degrees, somewhere around there. So yeah, I think some of that information is wrong. I think Mother Nature sows them in the autumn. That's that's naturally when it happens. So Mother Nature is never wrong. So we might as well go that way.
So if we have a warmer autumn where the temperatures are still quite warm, they could germinate.
They can germinate then. Yes, if you can get them in a bit like early autumn, yeah, they could still germinate. You have to be a bit careful because they need to get a big enough root system on them to grow before the winter starts. Otherwise, they mightn't get through that dormant period. Is the other possible downside of it. Yeah, but yeah, that seems to be but the other side of it is I've been involved in a lot of farmers generally sowing these seeds, and I've done a little bit myself. Just tell a couple of stories. We did experimental sowing of kangaroo grass one time, and about the 12 months I went over, it's only a little small 10-acre paddock it was, just experimental, and I found one plant up there and another one over here, and I knew them by name. But anyway, about 3 years later, my son was going to put mob of sheep on this particular paddock, and he phoned me up and said, "Hey Dad, we better not put those sheep in there. He said, there's kangaroo grass all over it. So it's got a mind of its own. The bloody stuff will grow when it wants to. So we need to be patient. It'll grow when the conditions are right, which is a bit of a frustration because we think it's a total failure, and then So I'm not suggesting they're easy to grow. They've got a lot of hard seed in them, which is amazing. That's a survival thing. Some will grow, as this kangaroo grass did, the softer seeds, but the majority of them tend not. It'll grow when the conditions are right, which is a very clever survival thing, but not so good if you're trying to get this stuff to grow that you've planted. So yeah, not saying that it's easy and you're never sure about the results, but well worth trying, especially just adding to what you've got. Don't kill everything that's there. The grass is there, just add to it, go through and direct drill it through it. Yeah. Okay. Ro, you'll ring the bell here in a minute. I better keep moving. Obviously, drought's on everyone's mind. But it will rain one day. It did rain once before, so it will happen. So no. Now, drought. How do we? We can't control droughts. Now, but one way of doing this is increasing the water holding capacity of soils. And the only really way of doing that is by increasing soil carbon. And the only practical way of increasing soil carbon is to grow plants. Plants are really the only thing that's practical that will increase soil carbon. And it's about all the stuff I've been rabbiting about here for a while, is plant diversity, especially plant diversity, lots of different plants, and especially perennial plants are the things that will increase our soil carbon. Now, the reason why I'll talk about this soil in a minute. If we increase soil carbon by 1%, which isn't a lot, but it'll be slower in this dry rainfall environment you've got. You know, if you can get 1%, it'll be pretty good. But even 1% to a foot, like we can build soil, you know, very deep. That's not a problem. But so we're only talking about a foot here, 30 centimetres. But 30 centimetres, an increase of 1%, will increase the water holding capacity of the soil by 168,000 litres per hectare. Now that doesn't mean much. Other than that's nearly 17 millimetres of rain over a hectare. Now, but that's on every rainfall event. It will increase the water holding capacity, the sponge effect. So if we even just 1%, every time you get 10 or 20 mils, it fills that up again. Now, and here, that's the soil, that's my neighbour's soil, and just through the fence, probably about 20 metres away, far enough off the fence line, is this one that's 2 foot, 500 mil. So we've built soil to at least 500 mils, compared to 100 mils where it started. Now, there's a lot more information on these two paddocks than I've got here. The question I often get asked, how come your brother's soil's still like that? But no, what that really measured was I changed, he stayed the same. So, but that one there is built carbon to that depth. So that's a lot more water holding capacity. The paddocks now have increased water holding capacity by about 200%. It's a lot more than 1%. Now, just to move on and finish up. If we look at the grasslands around Australia, now this is a dry rainfall, like a dry climate here, so that the carbon levels probably weren't 6 to 10%, but they were probably 4 to 5% in here. And we know what Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania original levels were, because explorers/scientists measured organic matter and carbon, organic matter in 1840, I think it was. Strzelecki did that, and he was measuring some soils at 15% carbon. Huge. 35% organic matter. So anyway, but our original grassland soils had the capacity to hold 1 million litres per hectare. I mean, huge. If you had soils like that again, and it's the grasslands that created those soils, you would have huge water holding capacity. You'd hardly ever be worried about droughts. You could run in some dry seasons, but and what you would definitely get, and I've seen it at home with increase, a 200% increase in carbon. The window of dry is that everything stays greener, and it starts quicker on the other end. So if you run into a dry season or a drought, everything gets away a lot faster and shuts down or slows down slower on the other end. So that's a way. There's lots of different things we can do, but of buffering against dry seasons and droughts. Maybe you're not going to totally control a drought like you've had here, like really serious ones, but by geez, it'll help a lot. Especially if you combine it with the grazing management that Alejandro's going to talk about here in a minute. So, how to restore our properties, change the way we graze animals, and change the way we grow crops, and restore the grasslands, really. It doesn't have to be complicated. Grow more plants. Plant diversity will restore our properties, soil and profit. And that's an ad for my book that I've got over there, which yesterday I forgot all about.
Excited to be here. They tricked me to come here because they told me that they will be taking me to greener pastures. I usually don't like to go to places like mine, but we're here, so it's great to be here. I am from Chihuahua, Mexico. Have you heard the word Chihuahua? Chihuahua. The only difference is that in Chihuahua, well, the little dogs came from Chihuahua. Yeah, but we had the wild ones, the original one, the native ones.
They're still wild, to be fair.
The domesticated ones are still wild.
Oh, really? Still wild? No, these are really like very aggressive. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ringing a bell.
They never changed, right? So when you drive across the state, then you can see, not easy to spot them, but sometimes you see them on the hills. They like the hills. They don't have the flats or the mountains because they can protect from foxes and coyotes and things like that in packs. But well, the Chihuahua, the little Chihuahuas, a little bit longer legs because they, but then so you see them on the hills, and then some people kind of. No, let me tell you, some people just are overconfident, so they get out of the cars and they may be actually attacked by the Chihuahuas, and they do like a little bites, but there's so many, so it's like piranhas. So be careful. Over the wall, I'm telling you, it's a big lie. Yeah, he was betting me about that. I did a good job, right? Okay. So, well, going back, I'm from Chihuahua. It's the largest state in Mexico. It borders Texas, well, obviously some states in Mexico, but Texas and New Mexico. So we're not too far from the border. And we are in the Chihuahuan Desert. We are nested right in the Chihuahuan Desert. So, but let me start with something, and this is central Mexico. Do you know what kind of plant is that? Agave. Hey, you're smiling.
My
What?
wife loves it.
Oh, you love it. Tequila or mezcal? Or both? Or a mix? Well, you haven't tried mezcal though. So yeah, tequila and mezcal come from that plant. Well, if you don't get anything out of Colin or myself, this is a takeaway. If you buy tequila, try to buy 100% agave. Because if it doesn't say 100% agave, she's writing down.
I'd actually read that about that white patch. I was like, I need to put garlic rods in here and make her own tequila.
Well, So, because if it doesn't say 100% agave, then most likely 50% is other sugars. So, you better go that way. So, write it down. So, these guys call us to help them get into more sustainable way, because now people are boycotting tequila because, you know, all the degradation. This used to be a forest, and then these guys are like some farmers that what they want to see just one plant. The other plants are competition. So let's get rid of everything else. But what they're doing, what they are creating with chemicals mostly, because, you know, they are not tilling like every year. It's just every 7 years they kind of mess it up again. But it's mostly with chemicals, even sealers, and then fighting this, fighting that. And then you have a lot of flooding, like very typical problems, right? Compacted soils. So this picture is not a before and after. We've been working with these guys. We're going for the 3rd year. So we've been working with these guys. The only tool that we used there was livestock. We didn't put any soil amendments. We didn't seed anything. We didn't anything. Just obviously trying to get them out of all these chemicals. So I think what made the difference is that the owner was very experimental. The owner started with multiple species: sheep, donkeys, and horses. And this is not a before and after. This is representing, it's like a neighboring property from that guy, and this represents 99% of the tequila. This is the way it's produced, because there's a high demand for tequila. Well, that's not the excuse, but. So now this is my, after a couple of years, this is how it's looking his. Obviously, we're talking about a 35-inch annual precipitation. If you get more rain, then you're gonna have faster, you know, recovery, or like just regeneration. But what I really want you to see here is actually how powerful is livestock. Because we're trying many times to see, should we add biological amendments, should we add this to the soil, blah, blah, blah. It's really what really the soil needs is the biology that the gut is bringing. And all the gut, well, really the manure, the saliva, the urine, the hoof action, even the act of breathing, it will promote life. And then because he stopped applying sites, you know, insecticides, herbicides, all that stuff, then you're seeing now some life there that is helping us control the pests. So that's where you can see all these creatures working. The ones that have the least of the problems is horses, and then sheep, and then at the end donkeys. But how do you prevent these animals from biting the agave? Well, you gotta make sure that the diet of those animals are correct, between gold and green, like your flag. Yeah. You cannot forget that, right? Because remember, for us, it's like to simplify 3 colors on any grasslands: gold, well, green, gold, and gray. We don't want gray, because gray is a plant that has been over-rested. The cattle are not eating that plant, or not even trampling that plant. So we want a good diet for the cows is something that has green and gold most of the year, because the green plants going to be at a good balance when they're in a bud stage. When they're forming the seed, it's a good balance between energy and protein. So just think about when you turn in your animals, let's say during the early rains, and you have that green up, right? With a lot of things that I'm telling you, that's how we used to do things. Or that's how we take it for granted. I mean, it's spring, the grass is coming up because we grazed to the bottom, everything. So what happened when you turn in those cows during the green up? Lose manure, right? And then they start shrinking. So we don't realize, folks, but when the cows are eating that green up, they ended up eating up to 30% more forage. than comparing to having a more balanced diet. Why? Because they're eating a lot of green and they're getting into a very expensive procedure internally trying to convert that green stuff into a more balanced diet energy. And if we keep doing that, what's going to happen is that you're going to be compromising the immune system because of excess of ammonia. And in a compromised immune system, you're going to have sickness. And one of the most common sickness is pink eye. So what do? Oh, let's go and buy something for pink eye. But it goes back to nutrition, and because you're not allowing the cow to select what she needs. You're only giving it green up, just too much green. Immature grass, you know.
So hay and green.
Say it again?
So give them hay and grass as well. So that's the goal, the hay.
Well, let me tell you how, because we don't put hay. Well, hay.
Hay?
Yeah. So because we have these long rest periods, when we open the gate during the early rains, then the green up is coming among the stockpile.
Yep.
That's the hay or hay. Yeah.
The hay.
Yeah. And then you're allowing the cow to eat that green up, but then also to eat that gold grass.
Yes.
So then you have a consistency in the manure. I mean, one of the name of the games is how do you keep things consistent year round for your cows and for the nutrition. Because if you think about for a moment, most of our problems, folks, will fall into two categories: nutrition and genetics. That's where most of the problems we have as ranchers: nutrition and genetics. And we're going to talk about genetics. Colin already talked about nutrition, you know, like how can we have a better diet along the year with cool season grasses, warm season grasses, and other plant diversities. Well, now let's go to the Chihuahuan Desert. So this is where we are. It's a big desert. It's the largest desert of North America. And it happened that we ended up right in the middle. My dad told me, you're going to dance with the ugliest. Just to give you an idea, just short video. It doesn't have a sound, but this is before I get to the ranch. So it's very degraded, a lot of erosion, quite unproductive. It doesn't produce nothing anymore. So how can you convert all that background into something more useful, which would be grasslands? Well, the thing is that you have to see the historical ecological perspective. What happened before? Like in Australia, it's just that we have more years behind us as you say, when the Europeans, but we say when the Spaniards arrived, at least on what used to be New Spain. So one of the clues that we have there, this fence was put only 50 years ago. But the problem is that once you start going downhill, wow, it starts accelerating. Because I tell on workshops, or I can ask you, are you about the same as 10 years ago? And if someone says, I think so, I'm sorry about that, you're lying to me. Because when you work with nature, everything is dynamic. So depending on how you manage, you will go forward or backwards. You cannot just stand still. So the first clue here, folks, is this layer of carbon. It's a lot of carbon. So that was not actually, I mean, there's not even nothing anymore there, but there used to be tall grasslands there. That is not produced by mesquite. I mean, like this is a mesquite. Obviously the mesquite, if you can see it, where the root system, yeah, there's carbon, but this was done by tall grasses. So that's what we're trying to restore. And most of the seed bank is there still. But even if you don't have the seed bank there, if you create the conditions of fixing the water cycle and more carbon, then they're going to germinate. They don't germinate because the conditions are not there. I mean, I'm talking about warm season grasses mostly. And then if the seed bank is not there, you have the wind, you have the water, you have the livestock, you have the wildlife, you have the birds. Somehow something's going to germinate. Plus, we have the written evidence of the Spanish priests. You know, they were the educated people at that time, and they were writing the journals. So these couple of priests, Dominguez Escalante, they were trying to find a way from Santa Fe, New Mexico, to Monterey, California, a new road. So they passed by Salt Lake, Utah. So I don't know if you have an idea of how, probably I should put a picture of Utah, but it's horrible. It's just desert, horrible desert. Well, they said in 1776 that they had never seen such a beautiful, lush, diverse grassland in whole New Spain. And New Spain went from Central America all the way to Montana. It was a huge area. So imagine, in what is nothing right now, barren soil, used to be grasslands. So that's like important to know, because some people got into defending the desert, but it wasn't a desert. And then going a little bit more recent, we had this map from our state, the state of the wild dogs. How can you believe me?
Have you met a Chihuahua?
Huh?
Yeah, they're believable, they're vicious.
No, how can you believe me? But there were wild Chihuahuas. Because they're wild.
Pretty ugly chihuahuas here in Australia.
Because they're wild, right? Maybe it became a pest in Australia. They were just running, chasing kangaroos. Right? The small ones, kangaroos. They told me they're like one that like this size. Is that right?
When they're about a day old, I think.
Miniature. What this is telling us about our state is it has a very nice climate. You know, we have a big difference where there's well-established grasslands and where there's bare ground. At least like in my ranch, which I only have probably no more than 50% grass cover, versus nearby ranches, I'm about 5 degrees in summer, 5 degrees cooler than my neighbors. We're creating a microclimate with fog in the desert and these incredible things that are happening. But also what really grabbed my attention from this map is the diversity of animals, which some of them are still there, but well, we used to have the bison. Bison, you know bison? Antelope, obviously deers. When they say tiger here, they refer to jaguars. We still have 1 or 2 jaguars, and not in my ranch, but in Chihuahua. But then otters and beavers, that was the point here. I mean, they were all across the state. So the first thing that goes away where we do not know how to manage in sync with nature is anything related to water. Turtles and frogs and some lizards related to water, or really these otters and beavers, they really need water. Even if you follow the old roads, they'll tell you where the water used to be. For example, in Rancho, there used to be a few springs that are gone. This is the ranch when it rains. you see, we have right at the middle of the ranch a big mountain range. And then when it snows as well. Yeah, some people, well, here in Australia, say, oh, are you feeling the cold? Yeah. Well, yeah. Like this year we got a nice snow. In my ranch it was a little bit less. When I was a kid, we got really very consistent snow, but right now it's pretty erratic. So this year we got a little bit of snow, a few inches, but there's some places in Chihuahua that they have half a meter on the high mountain range. And in my ranch, it got a few weeks -10, well, Celsius, and on those higher parts, -25. I'm not saying that, oh my God, this guy is tough and can deal with it. No, it was cold. And then this is our rainfall pattern, folks. So we have to produce enough grass here to go. See, we are becoming more conservative. And because of such erratic rainfall, our average is 9 inches, supposed to be. But we're getting to the 3rd year almost 3 years, and we have got only 7 inches on the 3 years. So how can we actually survive with such a drought? One of our keys, well, there's like a couple of things that we do. One is we leave a lot of grass. So we graze the same pasture or paddock every 18 months. Some people are going to 2 years. And some of you may be thinking, oh, but the grass is too mature. Well, I want to ask you folks, what is cheaper on a drought? Having no grass or grass that is a bit too mature? It's always cheaper to supplement your livestock with something so they can eat that more mature grass than no grass. I don't think we don't have grass, we shouldn't have any livestock to begin with. Right? It's all about how you keep money in your pockets after all the expenses. Because we know that you can increase your livestock with this kind of management, but what is the point if you go to a ranch, for example, in the US, and let's say 3 years, 4 years ago, when the price of a winner was $600, and they were spending $1,000 to run a cow for 12 months. So you tell them, oh, you need 2 more cattle. Well, I'm going to lose more money. So the goal is how do we reduce the inputs? So with the cows that the ranchers have, they can make a profit. And then the ranch is going to ask you for more animals as you grow more and better grasses. When I say better grasses, more nutrient-dense grasses, but more diversity, more cover, more nutrient-dense, because you're going to see that the grasses are going to be darker green, and they're going to last longer. The same grass, they're going to stay green longer. Let me ask you a question. Why is it so important to extend the green season, either with diversity or with the same grass? Why is it important for us as ranchers to extend the green season? Anyone?
Feed them, keep coupling around.
Feed them, pretty much to be able to take advantage of rangeland year-round, right? Because if we have, obviously during the rainy season, you're going to have lush, beautiful grasses. During the non-growing season, for us it's winter and also before the rains, then we are supposed to have a little bit of green at the bottom. And that doesn't change whether you're in our state or whether you're in the Dakotas next to Canada, because under a good grazing management, even in North Dakota, with one of the coldest places in the US, Gay Brown has green at the bottom of his grasses. So that's very important for us to reduce the inputs, to have a little bit of green, a lot of green, year-round. The other thing, folks, that is very important to have that green is because at the end of the day, we need that plant to feed the macro herd, the microbiology. Because, well, here's the second question. How do you put air in the soil? How do you make effective rainfall? Anyone familiar with the concept of effective rainfall?
Infiltration rate.
Exactly. I mean, don't tell me how much rain you get. Tell me how much rain you keep. Right? So, for example, in Colorado, they did a study, and also we did a study in Chihuahua. We don't infiltrate more than 35% of the rain that we got, 40%. So if I'm telling you that I'm, let's say, round numbers in a 10-inch area, reality, I'm really like in a 4-inch area. That's why when we get the rains, and then we just waste most of the rain, unfortunately. So what happens is that the root system is going to be really different on the same grass based on your grazing management. Under proper grazing management, you have this deep root system, same grass, and then kind of average, and then in a very poor, almost said stocking, very shallow root system. So how often do you need to rain on a very shallow root system? Wow, you'll be praying to rain every week, right? Oh my God, they're drying up. Oh, I need rain. That is obviously a challenge. And remember, folks, well, let me ask you this. What is the major limitation of grass productivity, is it water? I mean, to produce more, is air in the soil. So how do you put air in the soil? Have you seen, I don't know, I mean, when you take a shovel and you get to a cornfield, or there's strong winds and the corn just falls down, the corn is a grass, right? So what happened is that with tillage and chemicals, the soil get compacted, plated. And you see that the root system goes to where it hit the compaction and it goes sideways. So your root system, folks, they will not go where the moisture is. They will go where the moisture and air is. And the only way to put air in the soil is through microbiology, mycorrhizal fungi. So you need to feed that because that changes every 30 days. If you just stop the grain, you're going backwards and then compacted soils again. So that's why it's so important, going back to the question that I asked you, why it's so important to have green grasses year round? Because you're feeding the microbiology and you have a better effective rainfall. The sad reality is that we are getting less and less rain. This is a 40-year graph of the rains that we're getting, and you see the trend is going down. So we definitely cannot manage the way we used to manage. We have to manage in such a way that even with less rain, we can do more. When I joined the ranch about 2004, they said that it was here, we got about 20 inches. You know what 20 inches did in my ranch? Oh my God, it destroyed a lot of stuff because it just ran on top, create gullies, broke ponds or dams, as you said. And then in a few months, we were already in a drought mode. We were feeding folks for 6 months during every year. I struggle with my dad when I say, no, you don't bring more stuff. Oh, but what's gonna happen? Well, you know what happened? A few cows die. But the good thing is that they die only once, so you just suffer once. So how do we do this? I think Colin already explained this. We try to do this more intensive grazing. I mean, don't ask me how many cows per acre. I don't really know, because what we do there at the ranch is we just say, okay, how often you want to move your animals? First, we've been moving the animals more often, every week, and then every 3 days, and every day. Nowadays, we move them twice a day. But don't get me wrong, we have also vacation time. So if you have to go 1 week, 2 weeks, or the people, you just open up. I mean, nothing's going to happen. You've been doing it for every day, so because people, I have my foreman, I have a cowboy, and they also want to take time off. Mm-hmm. This gives you an idea of like the animal impact that we have in the desert. We don't drive, we don't herd, they just move on their own, or they follow you. If you see, I'm there. So they are following me. It doesn't matter if there's no gate, they trust you, they follow you. People say, oh my God, this is crazy moving so often. Well, it really becomes quite easy and enjoyable because you have more connection with your cattle. Right? And then you can read your cattle behavior, because at the end of the day, folks, the ones making the decisions at the ranch is the cows. Because you know the behavior, whether it was too little forage that you assign, or too much, or they run because they're excited about the next, or they run because of desperation, right? So every time we move the cows, we want to make sure that they're well fed every day. Every day they give you a feedback. Now, when we go and open that gate, we play two roles. We wear two hats. The herder, shepherd, like that. But before we open the gate, we tell the cows when to move. They may be, laying down, ruminating, which is a good sign, I would say, most of the time. So they don't move because we haven't really tell them to move. And then if we're riding a horse or walking, then we look at whole herd. And then the cows are at the bottom, we're gonna call them. Because think about for a moment your decisions of whether to supplement or vaccinate or open up a new pasture are made not by the top cows, not even by the average cows, are made by the poor doing cows or poor doing sheep, right? Because that's our tendency that we have to see the poor animals. To see, ooh, even though if it is just 10%, you're gonna make the decision on that 10%, and you're gonna deworm everything, or you're gonna or you're gonna feed them all. That's why, folks, we call often so we can make better decisions. Because we're trying to keep that herd clean. See, you have to play the predator role. So the less cows are struggling based on body condition or herd coat, anything that really takes extra time, those potentially could leave the herd. We don't do like we used to do, like, oh, those poor cows, take them to the corral, feed them, and get them back. Well, no, I mean, you're not going to make any progress that way. Well, I have to show you this picture of this pigweed because there was a workshop that I was in Australia, and I told them that once we apply animal impact, we had these pigweeds that were like this and this thick, and people were like, oh my God, because we were referring to different pigweeds. There's a little pigweed here in Australia and say, wow, that's like Jurassic Park or something like that. This is an amaranthus, and what happened when we make animal impact on that valley? Wow, we have a bunch of pigweed. I was riding my horse and it was like this, like kilometers of pigweed, but almost already very mature because it took us a while to go back to that pasture. So some people are concerned that, oh, if I don't kill that weed, it's going to spread all over the place. Well, I have to tell you something, folks. It doesn't work that way. If you're having more problems, more thorny things, more toxic plants, it's because the way you're managing. I mean, we have to change the way we manage. We have to create the conditions. We need to work for what we want. We spend a lot of time working for what we don't want. A lot of questions that people ask us is what they don't want. Oh, Alex, I was in New Mexico. Just tell me how I can get rid of the cholla. I don't want to know anything else. Cholla cactus. I know you have seen cholla cactus. You have seen cholla cactus, right, Colin? In New Mexico. So, how can I get rid of the cactus? How can I get rid of the thistle? Well, it doesn't work that way. Even if you let it mature, I think you should let it mature. Anyone familiar with thistle? Yeah? So most people fight thistle, right? But what nature is trying to tell you there? Have you seen the root system of a thistle, of a weed? Tap root, right? Where does it grow? In compacted soils. What is nature trying to do? Help us. Can you pull a thistle with your bare hands? So what is nature telling us? Don't pull me. But we have such powerful tools, spraying, you know. Oh, let's get rid of that because it's going to invade my ranch. No, what we need to do is to change the way we manage. So this was kind of huge, in a huge truck. Then we put the cows, they trample everything. Imagine, and we never see that again. We start seeing better grasses after that because nature is going to send you exactly what you need at that. I mean, once you do animal impact, as someone asked a question there on the demo site, right? There, something. And then that if we should just leave it alone. And Colin said, well, no, we need to bring livestock. If we were in a jungle, non-breed involvement, yeah, just leave it alone. But here, when we don't have enough moisture, the moisture and the biology is brought by livestock.
On the thistle.
Oh, okay. My idea was not to actually get you like thistle in your head the whole session.
Not how, I mean, I suppose how long's a piece of string, but how if you just leave them take over and then
Okay,
it comes back,
leave them,
nothing will eat them.
leave them, period.
Yeah.
Not leave them to take over. They will not take over. And if they take over, it's because you need them.
So you just leave them there until
Leave them, let them mature, and graze again.
so they'll just cover the whole earth and nothing else can grow there.
Okay, well, hold on. Okay, give me a little bit of time and then we're going to get there. I mean, something better is going to grow there. I think we were educated to think about, okay, if we have a weed, we need to fight and kill the weed because it's going to take over. I'm not saying it, you're saying it.
Yeah, yeah.
And on top of that, they told us not only that will take over, but they will not allow anything else to grow. If anything else if nothing else grows, it's because your soil is not ready to grow anything else, but because it's so compacted, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree on that point. Yeah, nothing is going to grow because you're not ready.
Yeah,
I think Christy John last time she said, if you have thistle, plant more thistle.
yeah.
Sell the seed. It's gonna compete with you, Colin.
Yeah.
She's selling thistle. See, because I think the problem is that
Yes.
we are not respecting natural succession, saying we cannot go from bare ground to these nice, beautiful perennial grasses. We need to respect nature succession, saying, okay, you have this, and then most likely you're going to have a lot of thorny stuff because nature is telling you, leave me alone.
Yeah.
And if you don't leave me alone, I'm going to kick your ass out of there.
Yeah.
Right? And then annuals, well, those are annuals, but they say that you make a little bit more progress, and then you're going to see different weeds as you advance, but also you're going to start seeing annual grasses. And then a few perennials and so on until you establish a more perennial base with some annual grasses and then some forbs, like these broadleaf flowers, but they don't have thorns. It's hard, I know. I understand it's hard because you just mentioned it, right? Take over and will prevent anything else from growing. I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah, no, I understand.
okay.
So we got a dairy near us. We got availability of a couple of thousand tons of cow shit. Is it worth spreading that over the paddocks? So if we put a tons per acre on it,
Well,
that's beneficial. We got sand at the moment.
yeah, there is, well, first of all, remember that I told you guys to be experimental. Don't go all over the board. If you believe that there could be a benefit, just take a section and see what happens. But then the foundation is always that you're grazing in sync with nature, because there's a lot of support from the governments to do this, to do that, or we are experimenting, but we don't change the way we graze, so we're just wasting our money. Now remember, excess of something is worse than the lack of. So we have seen places that they want to do like this circular economy, like we were in Colombia and they were raising a lot of pigs and they don't know what to do with that pig manure and they were putting it into the pivots and they were creating a chaos, I can tell you that, because the land cannot take so much shit. So be careful on that. Just do your experiment, and if you don't like it,
Would you ask what the cows are being, what those cows are eating? Because we don't have cows in farms, we don't know if they're eating enough microbiome is then going on.
yeah, good point.
That's important too.
Because, yeah,
Are they highly vaccinated
yeah.
and highly everything else?
You're right, that's a good point. Because some people also use like some sources of, let's say, trying to fertilize, but even they could come in with heavy metals.
So it's worth knowing
Yeah.
what they're being fed for.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying no or yes. I'm just saying you're trying a little bit. Now, Probably I haven't clarified this. If something, guys, you do works, then you can name a pasture like Alejandro or something. But if it does, no, I have seen that. But if it doesn't work, 1-800 Rowena. And then on that spot where we got this tall amaranthus, we were able to grow that grass. We didn't even knew that we had this seed bank for that 7 feet tall grass. And you know how much rain we need now to grow that grass? 6 inches. When at the time when my dad was running the ranch, kind of more conventional, not even 12 inches were enough to get out of the drought. So that's something you're gonna start realizing, like you can do more with less, which is what we need now, more with less, yeah. And you always have to build in your management, it has to be something built-in flexibility so you can adapt to nature, because nature is quite challenging, quite dynamic, I would say. So for us, if we already determined that we're moving twice a day, then on that particular week, on that particular day, we say, what is the size of the paddock that will feed my cows for half a day? It could be bigger in a drought, it could be smaller. For example, typically in a drought, we only do like 360 paddocks. But we are on a rainy year like 2022, we actually ended up having 1,000 paddocks because we couldn't advance. It was just too much, which is okay. We're, as I was telling you guys, we're more conservative in terms of how much grass we have for the next 2 years. And this is a really good spot at the ranch. This is winter. And we had a polywire here. So look at the animal impact, it's really good. Now we take that down, that fence, and you can see how it used to look. Now the cows moved to the next paddock.
You then fence that one off so they can't go back into that first one?
Oh, no, it doesn't matter. Yeah, we don't, actually many times we actually do more like a strip grazing. It's not like a strip grazing, but it's the size.
So the cows will stay there.
And the cows, yeah, because they put so much manure, and then you're also offering something better, that they don't go back, and then you're actually getting back that herd instinct. Even the donkeys stay with the cattle. So these used to be our winters, folks. Gray, remember gray? We don't want gray, but you know, my dad didn't know how to actually manage that. So when I told my dad, you know, I would like to try this, and then he asked me, so who's doing it? Oh, this guy and this guy. And he knew everybody because he was at the bank for many years. Okay, let's do it. They are honest, hardworking people. Now these are winters. So, look at the difference. Gray grass, not much, having to feed for 6 months at least. At least because when it rains, it doesn't rain grass, right? You gotta wait a little bit. So that's our winters now. Now we have some donkeys with the cows. I think they protect the cows, but that was not the main goal. The main goal is for the donkeys to take this low quality, so I don't have to force my cows. And if I'm mimicking nature, then I'm supposed to have more than one species, right? Not only diversity of plants, but diversity of grazers. Well, this goes back to what you mentioned, like allelopathic, you know, like when we work with the bird conservancy organizations in the US, because those migratory birds go and spend the winter at the ranch. And when they came to my ranch, they said, you know, Alex, oh, by the way, I'm Alex in Mexico and Alejandro here in the US. Okay? So we have a product that is going to eradicate that plant because it's invading and it's preventing the grass from growing, which makes sense if you do not consider the biology of the livestock. But once you put the livestock there actually passing by, or you have a little bit of grass nearby, then you can combine the paddock to have a little bit of grass. So And then look what happened. We were able to grow grass there. You can even see fog that is like, wow, incredible event in the desert. And I tell people, you know, the good thing is that that grass never read the book. Never read the book, you know. You cannot grow there.
No.
So the message here, folks, is war for what you want. Forget the rest. Forget the weeds, forget the woody plants, the thorny plants. We have a plant that we call it loco wheat, which when the cows eat it, yeah, or horses are worse. I mean, they just go whatever they want, but no, wherever you want them to go. It's gone. That plant is gone, or the cattle don't eat it, it just shrink. Look in the spring, after 9 months of no rain, my side is greening up, deep root system. My neighbor side, same grass, shallow root, lack of animal impact. It's not responding yet. Same in summer. You know, I grow more biomass, but of better quality, and this is on the same spot, my neighbor. Sometimes the problem, folks, is that conservationists, government, so on, they say, oh, you're not doing a good job, you need to destock. When I can tell you I'm running 3 times more cattle per acre than my neighbor. They don't want to take the time to learn, to think. That's why sometimes we call this management rational grazing. No rotational, rational. You have to think through. Look at on the same day that I was heading to my ranch, it was early summer. We got some rains already. And these are large pastures from my neighbor. And this is a more animal impact. No irrigation, folks. We talk about natural succession. So this is a study that a guy from France did in France, and he asked me, can you do something in your place? So you can see that nature gets pretty aggressive when we have bare soil. And if you're doing if you're regenerating, you're going this way. I mean, you can go the other way, but you go this way. So you got weeds, and then early grasses, middle grasses, late grasses, and then what used to be there as the trees. The trees that used to be there. It's just that this is going to take way longer.
What's the time frame for all that, roughly, that happened at your place?
Really depends on the range, but I'm going to show you some pictures. It was like 6 years. Yeah. Well, but I'm not here yet. I go from here to here, because this is take probably a few generations. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's also a change in biology too in the soils.
Change in biology, change the water cycle. Yes, exactly. The fungi to bacteria, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Something is cooking underground, right? So the bird guys, we call them the bird guys. They're protecting this plumalo falcon. But what happened is that these yuccas, where they nest, they're disappearing. And they blame us ranchers because they say, oh, your cows are breaking the yuccas. And with that thought, they're going to pay you not to have cows there, because they say, your cows are breaking this. Well, this is not my place. It was a picture taken from the highway, where the yucca is growing on a small spot of grass. We need to recognize, folks, that a lot of trees that we have, and you have way more trees, all across Australia, you are more like a savannas and forests. A lot of those trees that you have, and probably the best trees that you have been losing, were dependent on having grasslands. Now your trees are dying because you don't have grasslands. I don't know, is anyone talking about that? How the trees are dying because of?
They know the trees are dying, you know what's happening.
So this yucca is dying because of the lack of grass. So then you just go there and then it just breaks, not the cow, because it's dying. And then, well, it goes back to your question about how long does it take. I mean, obviously it relates to how intentional you are, and obviously would depend on the rains. But this was 2015, then 2018, and then 2021. See, we have a mix of annuals there, but still already grasses are establishing.
They haven't seeded anything into it. That's just nature.
Just the biology of the cow, getting all those seeds just at the right time, right? Because nature, it will not waste perennial seeds.
That's what's in the pad, cow pad. Spreading it around.
Cow path and also hoof action, urine, all the tools that the livestock bring, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying the grass only grows on cow path.
No.
But as you grow more grass, also you're capturing more water and you're protecting the soil against these high temps, yeah. At the end of the day, it's all about the microherd that is working underground, yeah. And then, most of the work that I do is in the Western US because it's similar, it's seasonal. And I can tell you something. The US, the Western US, and not only Western US, but your country and other countries and my country and all over the world, we're losing more grasslands or grasses because of the lack of animal impact than overgrazing. We need more cows, but we need more cows who are working in sync with nature, or emulating nature. So here, folks, I want to tell you something about raising the bar. I've been in some property, and the same happened there, in North America and other countries. So you have a lot of buffalo in many places. And people encourage us to keep that buffalo in a good state. In a good state, there's nothing wrong with that. The challenge with that is that by grazing multiple times and trying to keep that buffalo on a vegetative stage, keep the photosynthesis going, then we are not aware that we're overgrazing some new plants as part of the succession. So that's one of the reasons we try to do a more aggressive grazing, as long as the cows can take it, and the donkeys can take it, but the cows. So we try to take as much biomass, and then we combine that with a long rest period. And that's why we get all these new seedlings an opportunity to establish, like at least a year. And then this also goes back to a verse from the Bible, saying the promised land of milk and honey. So what do you need to produce milk and honey? Grasses don't have flowers. To be honest with you, I don't want to be a grass farmer anymore. It's too limited. As Colin mentioned to you, you have a lot of diversity in Australia. Why are we shooting for 20 different grasses or 10 different grasses? We need to shoot for 50, 100, not only grasses, but forbs. Because have any of you used the, measure the bricks, the tubers, right, with the refractometer? Well, when you go to a pasture that has forbs and grasses, forbs will always beat the grasses. So in order for you to produce milk, you need a lot of energy, right? So there you go, the forbs. How about honey? The forbs produce flowers, lots of them. So in a good rangeland that is quite regenerated, it's going to be very colorful, not like that. But obviously you need to establish that first, because the grasses are going to help you with the water cycle. Like this is a forb we have, and it only grows on well-established grasslands. Because if you see your forbs really need a better water cycle. It's only when you get a lot of rain that, oh my God, we're getting more. But because we're talking about consistency, if you don't get that much rain, but you have well-established grasses, then the water cycle is going to work better. And this is how we want to see our ranch. more colorful, more forbs, more life. Well, we already mentioned the donkeys. See, they eat everything. One really very important indicator for you folks is the leaf to stem ratio. As you make progress on this grazing, this is the same grass in winter, the never and my grass. Same species. So your grasses are going to change in form. They're going to create a more canopy with more leaves. Why? Because as the micro herd grows, the population of micro works, they need bigger panels. So automatically, they're going to help us capture more energy, feed more, and it will be a better feed for our cows and sheep. Because usually what is left after you graze a pasture is the stems. See, I was able to pull that grass with my hands. The shallow rooted. It's a perennial, but it behaves like an annual because it's sick. It's struggling to survive. And my grass, I have to cut it because it would be impossible to pull a grass with this root system. So what we're talking about there, measuring the breaks. See what happens when you increase the breaks. How do you increase the breaks? Well, you are fixing the water cycle, you're putting more microbiology so the grass can absorb better minerals and nutrients. And see what happens. You get an increase on daily gains as you increase the breaks. It's like a baseline that we use. Sometimes we go to a place. What is the breaks of this grass? But also it will protect your plants from pests because the plant is going to be stronger. So we're targeting for 2-digit breaks at least here, from here on. Most ranches are like here, 6. Well, we measure the breaks on Buffalo in Long Ridge, and some of that was 10, which was good. But we also measured the breaks on a Forb on Queensland, and it was 18. So it's that mix of diets that actually help cows do better. How about fighting these invasive species? Well, they are dying because they are now the invasive species is the grasslands. See, we're killing mesquite. We're not spraying mesquite, we're killing mesquite with the grasses. Even larger mesquites. Well, I think we're going to skip this section because you don't have forests in Australia, okay? But we have a big problem in the US last year. It was like crazy. I was in Idaho like in July, and then I went back 3 months ago, and it was the same. I actually got sick for so much smoke. So what is the point here with mitigating fires? Well, I think we are taking the wrong approach, guys. First of all, we're excluding livestock as a mistake. Like, I saw that nearby, well, where you live, right? There are some protected forests. It's like nothing underneath because they don't want to have cows. I mean, I understand because many times you don't manage the cows well and they destroy ecosystems. But reality is the same cow that they don't want, that the one that is going to prevent us from having quite destructive fires. Why? Because this study is very clear from NASA telling you that the drier the soil, the more fires you're going to get. Because instead of you having a normal storm, you ended up having dry storms, meaning lightning but no rain. And then I see fire as it's a natural, it's natural. But we're causing a lot of fires because nature's saying, okay, you screwed it up, let's press the reset button. And then it's starting all over again. But the problem we have with that, obviously, could be a loss of a lot of things. But the problem is that our times, folks, are not the same as nature's times. And that's when we have a problem with a fire. Because that's nature's way to say, let's start over again. You see the difference here. In the Northwest US, protected forest, and a forest that is being grazed. You tell me what the fire is going to be more destructive. So the plants that are actually going to help us keep the soil moist is the grasses. This guy is a guy in Chihuahua that is doing regenerative grazing, holistic management, and I'm at 1,400 meters. It's all high desert, but then you go grasslands, and then you go the forests, state. This is at 2,400. But look at how a good, nice forest should look like. Not only he's doing that, but he's killing the juniper. There's millions of dollars spent in the US fighting juniper because it's an invasive, but they never changed the way they graze. Look, he's killing the juniper. The same way I kill the other woody plants, he's killing the juniper because the juniper, the same way as mesquite, is not their environment. I mean, they were there for a reason, but now they are not needed anymore. So when we talk about armor in the soil, then this is an interesting picture because one of my friends was doing a pretty good job here, and then they never saw bare ground, but they never got all the snow. So he said, it's pretty unfair. Reality, folks, is when you have this armor in the soil, these grasslands in the soil, your temperatures are going to be cooler in summer, but warmer in winter. So he got more snow because of grass, but the snow melted much faster. Well, probably most of you have measured the temperature between bare ground and cover soil is huge. You read that one, right? Okay. And then we have effective rainfall. We talk about that. So at the ranch is incredible the difference between bare ground, 2 inches. We're able to capture 2 inches per hour, and where we've been working, 18 inches. And some people complain, I met some people from other countries, we don't want to talk about cows because cows take too many liters to produce a kilo. Well, we need to see this more in a holistic way because here we see the difference here, and we multiply that by my 30,000 acres ranch. We could meet the water needs for 100,000 people for a full year. That actually gives you the whole story, not only And then you have this small water cycle where Walter, how you pronounce Walter? No, Walter Chena. Have you heard about him? Well, now he's confusing me.
It's spelled China, but it's pronounced Yana.
China. Yeah, look at his videos. He talks about the big water cycle, small water cycle. So we here inland, we're responsible for that small water cycle, which is about 40% of the total rain. If we don't have well-covered soils, we're going to keep losing that. And what we have experienced in Chihuahua is that ranchers actually covering the soil, we're getting about at least 10% more rainfall. It's not only we're infiltrating more rainfall, we're also getting a little bit more rainfall. So what else is helping us there? What do you think about this cow pie? You like it? No, why you don't like it? Because it's still there. I mean, gray. Gray is not good. We lost all the carbon. So this is how it should look like. This is in my ranch. I need to thank the Aussies because those are the gazella dung beetles that came from Africa to Australia, then from Australia to the US, and then they crossed the border illegally. So this is a side view of the world of dung beetles. We need, first of all, don't kill them. If you use ivermectin, you're killing them. You just have 50% of the return if you don't have the dung beetles. And they also reduce, that's why you brought them here, they also reduce the fly population by up to 90%. How do you actually get around not having to deworm your cattle or put ivermectin? Selection and calling. Calling, you know. Any issue, you keep calling. And then you're gonna have a diversity of dung beetles. And then we have also termites. We saw termites in that trove. So the termites actually go and finish the work. There's nothing left. It's like the donkeys, there's nothing left after the donkeys. So, for example, you can see that we did not spray this mesquite, but it's dying, and then you have a beetle, not a dung beetle, beetle pruning the branches fall, and the termites take those branches and put it into the soil. And I didn't know, but termites have the most nitrogen-fixed bacteria in their tummies. So instead of this mesquite, which is a legume putting nitrogen, now nature passed the word to the termites. And they are even taking oxidized grass down. So we discovered that what is for the cows is good for the wildlife. It's been taking us a while to also get the spurred guys on board. But we have seen a lot of increase in wildlife. All these obviously native wildlife. And we have a station, motor track station. I think you have a few stations here in, not say a few or many, in Australia, where any flying animal that has the device, it will be captured by the station. And I can tell you that south of the border, our ranch is the one with the most endangered, like that one, and listed birds. So again, you know, what is good for the cows is good for the wildlife. I think we talk about that. That one. Then genetics. I mean, we talk about Colin, right? Colin often because you ended up making decisions based on the poor performing. And we also look at the best cows, the other end, and we get the bulls from the best cows. That's how we get the genetics back. We try not to keep bulls that are too old because they are just troublemakers. I always remember when I was in Western Australia, and I was saying that they are troublemakers, and the lady said, yeah, like these guys. So they don't work, but they are just there, just fighting, breaking each other, you know. So we try to keep the bulls young, let's say up to 4 years, 3 years. I have seen ranchers just keeping the bulls 2 years. What happens if you keep only bulls that are 2-year-old? Well, you have to deal with the bulls year-round if you have a breeding season. Plus, you're putting to your genetics, the same for sheep, right? You put into genetics early maturing thing, because only the bulls, the young bulls are early mature, are the ones that are going to actually be working your females.
So do you think there is a benefit to like remaining all in-house with genetics, or like if you were to say source bulls, you'd have to find someone who runs the same system as you're running?
Oh yeah, ideally. The more similar to you.
Yeah.
See, you will never buy a bull from an auction, or you will never buy a bull from a magazine, right? You gotta go and see what the rancher is doing, and say, is the rancher doing what I want it to do? Okay, now, we got a pretty good rancher in Mexico, or the mentor of my mentor, who first bought heifers, or females, and depending on how they perform, then he ended up going back and buying bulls from that guy. Yep. But most of us are raising our own bulls. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't buy any bull, but I am very careful what I buy because I'm trying to get rid of the problems, you know? Yeah. Like you can see some examples here. Like 2 cows from the same herd, but very different response in body condition. And it applies in any livestock. We were working with a bison operation in the US, and on the first days you look at all the bison the same, but then after a few days you start seeing difference in the bison. So really also the bulls apply more masculine. See, 2 bulls under the same conditions. This is the guy that I was telling you. He was a great rancher. This herd of Herefords in the desert They've been on a closed herd for 70 years. He's keep getting rid of problems, and then he also get into the beef of on the carcass to see how they're performing. So he got all the, and this is one of his bulls. So it doesn't matter the breed. Obviously, I will not bring a milking cow, right? Or maybe, I don't know. But it's you who actually is creating that stuff. It's creating genetics that are going to be adapted to your, and then see how these cows are adapted to eat cactus. We eat cactus like, well, without thorns because we're machos. No, but they learn to break the pad and then scratch in the soil and then eat it. Yeah, get the thorns. That's after dinner. So we talk about this, right? We keep getting rid of the bottom and then promote this back to the herd. In like trimming this, so you're gonna make better decisions, so you go from here to here. Better cows and not many poor cows, which is lifelong, you know. You never finish, you're always improving. And then the other thing that I want to share with you is this, how do you protect what's still good? So we always look for the best areas first, and then we go from there. We don't ask a new grazer to take a big challenge of correcting, I don't know, trying to fix like a big gully or quite. We always look at the ranch for the best areas, and then we go from there. Or they should go from there. Like this is a ranch, and this is how we prioritize. Sometimes you just mess it up because I put in red the mountain range and we just grazing because it was just only lack of grazing. There were no roads, no water. Then the first time we put the cows on the mountain range, wow, on 1 year it transformed. Like, well, but it cost me build roads, pumping water. So it was I put in red because it was very expensive to graze this stuff. But it turned out to be really good. So a bit of a summary. You can take a picture, read it, but the foundation is always a good water system, folks. You have to have plan A and B and C for water, because having issues with water in a few hours, you got a mess. And it keeps going. So we're trying to simplify one herd or as few herds as possible, because otherwise everything is going to get more complicated. As they say, you know, the cattle business is a simple business, or the livestock business. The most complicated thing is to keep it simple. And this is a video of the ranch once, kind of some places that we've been able to regenerate or rejuvenate. So you can see that now we have a good pieces of chunk of grasses, well-established perennial grasses. So here the message, folks, is that we were created to see beautiful things. We were not created to deal with dust storms. I mean, there's no dust storms when you establish the grasses. We were not created to deal with flooding, with high temps, with thorns, with cactus. We were created things like that. So what happened is that goes beyond your profitability. Like, this is my dad. He's 92. When my mentor went to my ranch, almost 20 years ago, let's say 18, whatever, he told me, Alex, you're talking about growing more grass, being more profitable, having more cows, but you haven't thought about something. What you're going to be doing is going to give more years of life to your dad. And he's so excited to go to the ranch. I'm just going to go quickly to these examples because of where we are. So in Chihuahua, this is getting a lot of traction because people that really were very reluctant to do this, now they can go to 50 different ranches in any location and there's no doubt that this works. We need more reference here in Australia so people actually can go and see there, more community driven. So for example, this guy used hay. He's a farmer as well, cropland. He put a little bit of hay where he has bare spots, like, on strips. Then on the first year he got good rains, then he established something.
So he left that then for a year, yeah, when he got to that point?
Yeah, I mean the commitment is that you graze, for example, in that demo site, you graze once and you're committed for life. You need to keep grazing.
So graze it and then
Graze it and then leave it for a year and then graze it. Sometimes people use that, they call it like bale grazing, or a more fancy name is biocarpeting, but it's the same deal. So to connect areas that are not connected, that they are bare ground, because when you're calving, you cannot move the cows that far. Annuals, but still you have something there. Then this mine that is also in Chihuahua, a friend of mine took that challenge. So he put a little bit of layer of topsoil. Well, the owner of the mine was willing to get something back to the native people. And then he brought the cows. It's a pretty broken mountainous range.
that's what I've got. I've got one of those.
Oh, these cows?
No, one of those mines, limestone.
Okay.
So I need yards like that with
Well,
cows on.
This proves that you can pretty much grow anywhere, because this was just like gravel.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, they put a little bit, soil there, and they brought local cows. It does snow there. Yeah, they got good snow there. And then on the first year, this is like a 20-something inch per year. So they try not to put too much hay because they will inhibit the growth, but they learn how much hay they need to put, and they put seed on the feeder. And then you see how it's actually greening up the whole thing. And now they are planting, once they establish the grasses, they're planting evergreens, pines and things like that. Yeah, this project did pretty well. I think he got the first place worldwide on regeneration. So you can use livestock for many, many purposes.
So how long do they leave them in one patch before they move it to the next?
They were doing daily moves.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So how do they physically move fences and things?
No, they build the fences ahead of time like we do it. All polywire, obviously the cows respect the electric fence, yeah. And then this is another friend who is in the middle between the desert and I'm in the desert. That was on the high mountain range where you see the previous forest. But then the grassland, what we call the grasslands. And this guy was on the grasslands, a little bit more rain than me, probably 12 inches, 13 inches. But he was in a very, very poor condition. Everything was pretty ugly. Look. It only took this guy, well, he got a mentor. He only took 5 years to get to here. And then obviously he changed genetics, and then the genetics with better nutrition express themselves. And then, see, when you go to his ranch, he's always have the horses waiting for you. Even though he has UTVs and things like that, you gotta ride the horse. He's a horse guy. Now I got another friend, we're gonna finish with this. I got another friend who has a ranch similar to mine, but he wants to prove people that he can grow grass on the sand dunes of Chihuahua. So he doesn't have cattle there. Probably he got the ranch for free, but whatever the case was. But he bought this ranch, that's his truck. So he brought the cattle from his ranch for only like a couple of months. He started doing some bale grazing. He doesn't do that. He doesn't have to do that now because now he's growing grasses on the sand dunes. Like, that's the kind of animal impact that he did. It's just seasonal. You know, he bring the cattle, left. That was the road. Now this is how the road looked like. He didn't bring any seed. See, he's growing grasses. So what was the lessons we learned from after 15 years? You never have too much water. I mean, I'm trying to meet the first person that complains about, oh, I bought too much of a big pipe. Oh, this tank is too big. But the other way, yeah, we mess it up pretty bad. So you need to prioritize your investments, getting on the long hanging fruit first. You need longer rest periods. You gotta work on your genetics. You gotta stop fighting nature. And you need to hang out with like-minded people. Thank you. Keep breeding with the same, right? Because they're trying to get very like line breeding.
Mm.
Inbreeding is when it doesn't work, line breeding when it does work.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, we've just been worried about inbreeds, so we've always been buying.
Because you keep getting rid of the problems.
Yep.
I mean, the whole purpose of line breeding or a closed herd is to get rid of the problems. So the whole purpose is to get adapted cattle to my ranch.
Yep.
Based on my management and whatever at the stage where I am on regeneration. Get rid of calving issues, you know, body condition, because we also select a lot for body condition, hair coat, dinky calves, miniature calves. I mean, every time we used to bring a bull, there were new problems. Because, you know, I think we shouldn't be on the business of selling bulls. I think selling bulls should be the result of doing a good job. But sometimes we change the priorities and say, I'm going to dedicate myself to sell bulls, and then, because they're very costly, then you start, you know, your honey checking. So when you have commercial cattle, then just get rid of them. And in the worst case scenario, in Mexico, we make barbacoa, you know, like barbecue, but barbacoa is like you put the head of the animal on a hole, in a pit. It's pretty good though. But in the worst case scenario, where you have a 2-head calf, you're gonna have more barbacoa.
You're like worried about having 3-litre sheep, 5-litre sheep.
Maybe.
Roast let be a roast joint.
And it does apply to any livestock.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what then if you're doing it on a smaller scale, don't have the space to keep
Resting.
like your next generation of say bulls, like as in to select from. So like obviously
So you don't have enough numbers
yeah, so you have enough numbers
to keep
select.
the diversity of genetics, or that's what you mean, or?
Yeah, to actually keep a decent enough.
I don't know, that's a question that always come up, but I know there's a minimum number to keep that diversity. I don't really know. I mean, like, it could be 100, could be 50, I don't really know. I mean, I think the most important that any issue that you see, you get rid of that animal. So you're trying to cool the issues. Now, resting, who said resting? You.
Oh, just thinking, because some of us are, you know, hobby farmers and very small acreage, but looking at getting native grasses back. How do you, like on 30 acres, how do you do that heavy graze and then
Because first of all, you need to match the current capacity with the stocking rate. Many people have too many animals. They're already feeding with hay. So you need to first get your numbers right, and then, you know, or keep putting hay or hay, whatever.
So in my case, I have 0 animals. It's purely land to revegetate. Do you recommend bringing something in once a year?
Well, it depends on your goal. If your goal is to regenerate the land, maybe you don't need animals. You may bring animals from the outside. See, I prefer, for example, in a small place to bring 100 animals and finish in 1 month, than to actually having to care for a few animals year round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'd probably be beneficial to run, say, an adjustment profit as an adjustment property, and someone else has their stock on for a set period, pay you for it, and and their stock is gone.
Get rid of them.
Problem is notoriously, and no offence farmers, but if it's labour intensive and they think that, oh, I'm going to move all of them there
Yeah,
4
but-
weeks and then have to move them again.
Yeah, but you
You've
just,
got to have the mindset person to do that.
Yeah, you've got to find the right farmer that's prepared to help you out that way.
well,
Yeah,
it's not just that, but at the moment with feed being the way it is, if you have
they might grab
if
that
you have
opportunity.
anything
Yeah,
that they
yeah.
can use for a short time,
Yeah.
there's probably farmers out there
Yeah.
that would be willing to bring. And if you say a larger amount of animals, they're probably, because that's the other thing. A lot of people then look at that from the perspective of I can only have so many year round,
Yeah.
so I can only have 100 head year round. So you know I can only have 100 head on adjustment, but you might be able to do 300 or 400 because you're only been there for a couple of weeks.
Exactly. Remember that you can have 100 cows in 1 acre. That's, well, your metric here is 100 cows per acre. In the US would be 100,000 pounds per acre. But if instead of that you have 1,000 cows on 10 acres, it seems to be the same, but it will never be the same. Because the larger the herd, even if you lower the densities, they will do a better job than a small herd. So it's better that, we have seen ranchers that actually change the model from cow-calf. I mean, some of us love cow-calf, but for example, those ranchers in Montana, crunch some numbers, they sold the 300 cows, develop a good water system, and now they're bringing 2,000 yearlings. Oh my God, the change is just impressive. I mean, with those big herds. And it's seasonal. I mean, they just take some vacations in winter. Any other question, folks? You have a question.
No.
I was just going to say something to Colin. We've sort of been mucking around for a while, sort of trying to convert like our land type of way that it is to get to be more grass dominant. We seem to struggle, and I'm wondering if it's because like our country's only been clean for sort of 50 years.
Yep.
Prior to that it was pretty dense, sort of mallee scrub.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there just isn't the native grasses there, because we just don't seem, like we've tried spelling country for a year, we've tried spelling it for 6 months, we've tried all these different things.
Yep.
We just don't seem to be getting them coming back.
Yeah, well, there most likely wasn't as much many grass species in Mallee as in a true open grassland. What do you reckon? Would that be correct? Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So you're probably right. You probably got less of a seed bank in that type of Mallee country. But even so, what Alejandro's talking about to bring to big mobs, long recovery, would still regenerate that land.
We found that does work better than, because
Yes.
that's the other thing I get a bit like, there seems to be a lot of theories about how we should graze, and like we're sort of, some would say we should sort of have a priority paddock, we graze away from it, then come back, and so we're sort of grazing several times throughout the growing season.
Yeah.
I think, to me, the bigger the rest period, the better.
Absolutely. Keep that in your head.
Yeah.
Yep. Rest period is absolutely critical.
And it seems the drier.
So we've been here about 30 years, and we used to grow crops up until 2016, and then we pulled our cropping and just running sheep.
Yeah.
We've been finding the paddocks are going back to native grass and producing a lot more feed than what they were up until this year anyway. And we usually run about 1,500 ewes and breed our own rams, and and got it's about 2,000, about 24,000 acres that we're farming on, but it's about 6,000 acres of thick scrub as well. So it's, and then the other lot's about half cropping ground and about half grazing shallow limestone, speargrass plains.
Yep.
This is all part of a drought-funded project aimed at increasing species diversity in pastures and using grazing management, but also we've looked at a little bit of seeding as well. We've got a demo site, this one, and then we've got the one in the hills at Macclesfield. After Alejandro came in 2023, he set a bit of a homework for people to do a grazing, like a move every day with their grazing and then rest the paddock for a year. And so that's the idea that we're trying to do at both sites. This one, because of the season, we didn't do that. We just fenced it because it would have been grazed, and we obviously didn't. It wouldn't have been a good idea to graze it again. So we just fenced it. We've fenced it with exclusion fencing as well to see how we go with, you know, keeping roos out and rabbits out. And we've got a little area. I don't want to turn around because of the mic, but over that side of the demo site, there's. We've done some seeding, and in the back of those guides there's a list of what we seeded there, both C3 and C4 species. And we've done a bit of monitoring for what grasses and plants were in here originally, and then we're also monitoring the infiltration rate as well. So we've also got some seedlings that are going to go in, but we were waiting for a bit of moisture. So, so they're grass seedlings that Amy grew, and so there's a whole range of those. They're all listed in the back of that guide. So, if you're interested to know, and the idea is with the seedlings is that we might have a potential seed bank sort of area, so that we can let it spread itself, but also can collect seed if we want to, and yeah, potentially graze it a little bit, but we'll see how that goes. But so it's all, yeah. I don't know if you want to explain it, Bruce.
So there's another fence to go in about 20 metres inside the back fence, and then that's where the seed bank is. And then there's also another 10 metres strip over the other side, and that's going to be a control where there'll be no grazing at all.
Yeah.
You can see the difference that grazing makes within here and outside the fences.
Yeah. So we've only just really fenced it off late last year, and obviously there's been no rain, but yeah, so hopefully at the end of this year there should be something to see, you know, a little bit of difference, and then moving on there should be more to see. We used Seeding Natives, their machine, to do the seeding, and it basically, we didn't do any weed control. It basically just goes in. It's got little spikes that drop in about that far, and then it drops the seed and drags like a heavy roller over the back of it. So so that was done in April. Was it April? Yeah. So it's only just been done, but we've got C3 and C4 grasses in there. So hopefully we might see some winter ones start to germinate soon.
And all of the strips along there too, so we'll see what comes up. I watered that last Thursday. Anything come up from that, I'm not sure yet.
Just without what's being sown, what will be interesting, because this will be rested for really long rest periods, and we're both going to be talking about long rest periods in a practical sense and a bigger scale, but it'll be also a really good demonstration area of what happens when after it's been grazed, and then a long recovery period of just what turns up in these paddocks. It may surprise, well, I'm hoping it'll surprise everyone. What actually is here.
I was about to ask that. These, areas that have been overcropped and overgrazed for a long time,
yeah.
If you just leave it alone, what are the chances of something coming up?
Usually just leaving it alone isn't enough. which is what good grazing management will do. You need some form of disturbance, and Alejandro will talk a lot about that, we both will. But yeah, it's just locking something up and leaving it doesn't really work that well. We need to do something to stimulate the germination of the seed in here as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's the gut of the animal, because what we're lacking on this land is biology, it's life, so it's the gut of the animal that is bringing the biology. And personally, what I would have liked to see here is first, I don't know how many sheep you're running, but put all the sheep here, get them out, let's say half a day.
Yeah.
Get them out and then start the process of seeding or things. Now, what we have also done in Chihuahua is we put the seed on the feeders. So when you get the seed is more, well, I'm talking about cattle, right?
Yeah.
But the seed is in a more, it had a more chance because it's part of the, it's part of the cow pie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
So, just thinking aloud, and a question mostly, what I just thinking then, and Alejandro's obviously right, it's maybe a good idea, and this is a question more than anything else, to put the sheep in here reasonably quickly, like before anything germinates from this little tiny bit of rain we've had. It's like you said, in and out, half a day and out.
How many sheep are you talking on you put too many on here and you end up on the other side of the fence?
We're only talking about a few hours, not a few days.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh no, yeah, it's like an experiment where you don't even need water.
Yeah.
You're gonna get as many animals as possible, like in a few hours, and then take them out.
Yeah.
Like you're penning your animals.
Yeah.
You're corralling your
Just
animals,
like putting them in a yard for a little while and letting them out.
Yep.
Yeah.
But they'll smash all this and you won't have, and you get a wind like yesterday, and then you're not going to have anything for the next 3 months.
That's why we waited for the wind to go over first.
Yeah.
So you tell me there's no more wind coming?
Well,
yes.
we brought the rain now.
So that was rain.
No, you're right there. But it obviously has to be practical. But and it is. It's just like putting them in a yard and then for a couple of hours, let them put manure and urine all over this and trample a bit and then out. Is that fair enough? I mean,
we cannot control nature. I mean, we have pounded some places and then the strong winds come and then it's a lot of dust.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. But what we really want to see here is to bring that biology, manure, urine, saliva, hoof action, and then because I don't think they will cause much damage right now.
No.
Pretty much nothing is wrong now.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Would it be worth just sort of like cutting it in half and doing do half and don't do half?
Yeah.
And just see what the difference is?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's always a really good idea. Do your own on-farm trials is a great thing to do.
If they were respecting electric fence, then probably cut it like in 3 parts and then 3 moves. Let's say half an hour each move and then you're done.
Yeah.
Electric fences don't work very well up here, though.
No.
Because we haven't got enough moisture.
They do. They will work if you do it right, though. Like if we do it at home and we run sheep behind one single hot wire.
Yeah.
And as long as you get your earth right, it'll work.
But it won't. We haven't got enough moisture in the ground here.
But we were up at Craddock yesterday, and there's a couple rotationally grazing there with 2 hot wires with sheep, merino sheep, working fine, very well for them. So
either electric fence or you pretty much chirping a little bit, moving the sheep here, there, and then you're done. Yeah. I mean, to meet the goal, right, of a bit more higher densities. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you add the biology with compost or compost teas and extracts?
Could you add the biology?
Could you add the biology with compost teas or extracts?
You could do anything, but this is not about that. We're trying to do it very low cost, very easy. Yeah. And the biology, as Alejandro said, is coming from the animals.
After it's germinated, so they don't just pull the whole thing out the ground, is there a...
As long as possible.
Yeah.
There's like a minimum time where the grass is at a boot stage when it's forming the seed. You cannot overgraze that grass anymore because the root system is fully developed.
Yeah.
So if you're grazing a grass before boot stage, you're overgrazing that grass.
Yeah.
But you have to look for the whole
diversity of
Yeah.
plants.
But not only that, if not only native grasses, but any grasses, if they graze it too young before the roots get established, they'll just pull it out of the ground.
Yeah.
So it needs to be left until it's really well established. And if you can't grab it and twist it and pull it, if it comes out of the ground, well, that's exactly what the animals will do. So don't graze it. I'm talking about this here that's been established, like a sown, but even any fresh grasses as well. Very important.
What you could potentially do here, if let's say we are having the seedlings and they do respect the electric fence, and you're here probably taking care, is put a fence here.
Yeah.
So you can graze that far.
Yeah.
and
That's what we will
wait
do.
for that to
Yeah.
actually recover.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've actually got, the plan is that the post there, Bruce? See the post in between the two other posts there? There's one sort of in the middle. Yep. We're going to fence from there along, and so half of the seeding will be in the grazing area and half will be fenced off to manage separately.
Right.
Yeah.
And remember something, folks. We always encourage ranchers to be experimental.
Yeah.
I mean, the ranchers are actually make more progress if the ones are see their properties as laboratories.
Yep.
So, like, this is great because it's a small plot that you can actually do whatever you want, because if we cannot use this small plot, then probably we're overstocked. But do be more experimental, work as a community, see, okay, well, this guy told me this, let's try this here, or so, yeah. Because remember, results here on this land is just once a year. You don't do it this year, and then you're gonna wait another year, and so on. As they say, you know, the cattle, or sheep, but I'm so used to cattle. Business is very simple. You just need to learn 100 lessons, but it's one per year.